Okay, everybody. Again, through the magic of film, I was able to go and embroider our little octopus. I thought about a whale because of the wave effect, but it was water regardless, and I just fell in love with the little octopus in this bright pink color. I thought it was a good contrast. Of course, you can do anything with your dress. You don't have to do anything with the dress. I just didn't think the pocket would go back on really well since it blends in so well. Even with a monogram on it, it would just be busy. So, what I've done so far is we've cut the shirt up. We've used a quick sew pattern to cut the basic shape out for the front, the back, and the sleeves. I have serged the sleeves onto the front and back, and this is kind of what our pattern looks like, as you can see. Oh, is it easier to read this way? Either way, I think it's upside down, but anyway, so we've got our seams here. You can see where I did it with the serger, so I've got this hanging out. Don't worry about that. You can trim it, but honestly, it's going to be caught when we roll up the side seam. So, or when we sew up the side seam. The next thing we got to do is we have to take our little dress and create casing for our neck. We're going to put elastic all around the neck. Now, in the pattern, it says to make a little hem here for the casing. Now, I think that's a good idea if you have stretch fabric, but this is cotton and it's not cut on the bias, obviously, so it tends to pucker when you make a casing out of it to put the elastic in. And we're just using good old 1/4 inch elastic. I obviously have a huge spool from COVID times, so plenty of masks. So what we're going to do, I found this works a little better, is we're going to use some single fold bias tape. There, and I'm using white. Again, this is just single fold bias tape, and it looks like this. So it has this little center fold where you can fold out the two pieces, and we're going to attach that right there at that seam line, well, at that fold line, onto our neckline, and we're going to line up the edges right along the edge of the fabric. We're going to line that up with the edge of the bias tape, fold open, and then when we sew it on, and you'll see this, we're going to fold it over, and that will create that nice little crisp seam. And since it's bias tape and it has a little give and stretch because it's on the bias, that will allow us to fold it over without getting any kinks. Now granted, if you wanted to continue and just fold it over, if you didn't have bias tape and you were just doing this on the fly and you wanted to fold it over, it will work fine. It will be a little buckled, but in all honesty, you're running elastic through it, so it just looks like part of the gather. It's not a huge issue, but I do like this this cleaner method for these dresses. I would usually use this on the sleeves as well, but as a friendly reminder, we have a casing already, because when we cut the little short sleeves off, we had the little hem is already a casing. So all we're going to have to do, we can do one of two things. We can run a seam right along the edge, or right in the middle, I guess, of that hem, create our 1/4 inch pocket, and then we'll have a little bit of a 1/4 inch, kind of like a ruffle. Or we could just run our elastic over the back of it and not worry about a casing, because if you pull your elastic while you're sewing, you can get a gathered look anyway. Now, I'm not that great at that. For some reason, I can't coordinate pulling the elastic while I'm pushing the fabric through. I mean, I can, but it's not my strong point. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some elastic the length I know I need for the arms and for the neck, and I've already got that measured out. My granddaughter is usually, she's small, so it doesn't take a lot of elastic, and I will let you know what that size is, and we will go to the sewing machine and put our bias tape on our neckline, sew our elastic into our sleeves, put our elastic into our casing. I might bring it back over here to show you that. And then the only thing we'll have left to do is sew up these sides. Once you sew up the sides, that's it. That's all there is to do. And you can see these match up pretty good. I don't think we're going to have any major adjusting to do. So let's go to the sewing machine, get that casing made for the neck, and go from there. Okay, now we have threaded, put our dress on the machine as far as in the neckline, and I took the extra part of the arm off so I get a little thinner arm and it's easier to go around. Now this is the right side of my dress because I'm going to put this bias tape on the right side, so when it's all sewn on, and we're going to fold it in to the wrong side to make the casing. Now this is, I believe, let me just check. Yeah, this is 1/2 inch wide bias tape, which will be more than enough to make a casing for a 1/4 inch elastic. Now, I'm starting in the back. I'm not pinning. Of course, you are welcome to pin if that makes you more comfortable. This particular part, because I'm just sewing in this little fold line, it's not crucial that I pin it. It probably would make my life easier, but it would also take my life longer. So anyway, I'm starting back here. This is the back seam line between the back and the sleeve. You can start anywhere. Actually, I might start a little more here where this is the middle of the back of the dress. I'm going to just put my bias tape down, and I'm going to make sure I've got it lined up. Now, I need to make sure that that seam is in that fold. So I'm going to adjust my needle to be right on that edge. Okay, now I'm going to do a 1 stitch, and I'm going to do a back stitch because that's just the way I learned. And we're going to go around. I am keeping this bias tape and the edge of my fabric on the edge of this particular presser foot, and that leads the seam, the stitching, to go right into the fold of this bias tape. And we're just trying to make sure we keep it nice and straight. Now when you get to the seams, you might have to just wiggle it a little bit, make sure it's following. And we just want to make sure it's nice and straight. This neckline seems to get bigger as I continue to sew and think about how long it's probably taking me, so I may fast forward here just so I don't bore everybody. Now we're at the front, and again we're just going to sew right over that button area. Alright, and I'm using it right off the spool because that's just okay with me. I'm going to adjust my dress a little. Keep on going. Now we've got enough left over for another dress. And what we've done is we've sewn the bias onto, that's just a ravel, onto the right side of the neckline. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over, and that's going to create that 1/4 inch casing we need for our elastic. See? Just looks like this. And this is right sides to right sides. And then we're just going to fold it up and over. And that's going to make our casing in the back. Okay, now we've got our casing made for the neckline. Again, we're going to fold it over and make our casing. Now we have a little opening in the back where we started. So we're going to fold that over, but it's okay if that's not, if that's raw. We can sew a seam over it when we finish the elastic, and that'll keep it in place. That's on the inside of the dress, and it's a little neckline. No one's ever gonna look at that. We hope. Anyway, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this inside out because we're not working on the wrong side now. And we're going to, now some people would press this. I don't really feel like I need to. Again, I'm slipping my neckline over and this is the back where our bias tape is meeting. And over here, the bias tape got a little weird because it had a fold in it that wasn't supposed to be there. I just kind of worked over that. As long as I've got a 1/4 inch to add my elastic into, I should be fine. Alright, so I'm not going to worry about that end right now, because I can sew that up when I'm through. So what I'm going to do, keeping my needle in the farthest position over to my left, I'm going to run the bias tape right up underneath my presser foot. That way I'll get it as close to the edge. I want to leave that 1/4 inch to be healthy. Actually, I might just do a little bit more. I want to at least a 1/4 inch. I don't want it to get bunchy, and I don't want it to be hard for me to string that elastic through. Alright, so again, a little back up there to lock our stitches. And we're just keeping that bias tape right underneath that presser foot, so we know we're as close to the edge as we need to be to leave our 1/4 inch allowance for our elastic. And we're making sure that it's nice and tight up against the neckline, so you don't see the white from the good side, from the right side, but you get a nice crisp line. Now I've got a seam here, so I'm going to give it a little more. Buttons are on the other side, but they're far enough down where they shouldn't cause me any problems. I'm not running over a button. That's what I was talking about earlier. When you're cutting out your pattern, you want to watch where that last button or that top button lands to make sure you have enough room to create this casing and not have any major issues. Now, I have removed buttons if it was just a matter of, length. I have removed the top button before to make the dress the length I want and use the fabric I needed. So it's doable. You can fix it. Now this is that serger string. I'm just going to cut it off because it's going to actually get caught up in this casing, and it's not anything to worry about. Because it's a serger line, it lays pretty flat. Obviously you're not going to be pressing a seam open if it's a serger seam, so just lay it whichever way is comfortable. I try to lay it whatever way it wants to, because then I don't have to fight it. But if I'm getting picky, you always want to try to push your seam allowances towards, like, both of them towards the sleeve, both of them away from the sleeve, something consistent. Consistency will make your patterns come out nicer, and it will make your, it'll just make your pieces nice. Pushing that seam line up, make sure that I don't have any white showing. Now this is that funky part that it was something wrong with the bias tape, but I didn't take the time to pin it, so of course I didn't know about it. And I'm not going all the way to the end here. I'm leaving that opening, and I'm back stitching a little. Sometimes my machine doesn't want to cut. So I've got this little opening. That's where we're going to stick our elastic in. And the other thing I'm going to go ahead and do while I've got it on the machine is I'm going to sew. It's hard to see, but there's a seam right here that makes this hem on the sleeve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and kind of find the middle. Let's see if we can get a middle on that. Good old hemming ruler. I think I got my share of them. So that hem is 1 inch from the edge to the seam line. It's 1 inch, and we only need 1/4 of an inch, but I think I'm going to do is I'm going to split it in half. So let's see what it looks like on the machine. If I was to split this in half, it would be try to use my presser foot to my advantage. Honestly, if I was to push it here, where my needle currently is in the farthest left position, with the fabric touching the edge of the presser foot, that would be the half mark. So I think that's what I'm going to go with. Just like I said, splitting that hem in half so it gives me a little ruffle. Back up a little. Always lock your stitches if you can. I'm just running the edge of that hem for that shirt sleeve right almost under the right side of my presser foot, and that should cut it. Whoop. And that's going to leave, what's going to do, it's going to leave this little piece right here, this 1/2 inch, that when I put the elastic in this portion between the seam line and that one, it's going to ruffle. So we're going to get a little extra out of that sleeve. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other sleeve. Again, just right under the right edge. Of my presser foot, little back stitching there. So now we have a casing on each arm for our elastic. We have a casing around the neck. We're going to put our elastic in. We're going to cut that off. It's just our serger seam. And once we put the elastic in, we'll have only the side seams to complete. And I'm just clipping off the little strays here. Now, I already cut my elastic. Again, my granddaughter's kind of tiny, so she's going to be 2 in August, but she still seems to be the size of a 1-year-old. So I cut 7 inches for the arms. Now, that's a little big for her, but I got to take into account it's going to have a seam, and it's going to have fabric gathered around it. So 7 inches should be more than enough for her little arms. Fits around my arm, as a matter of fact, so that's a good sign. And then I cut 14 inches for the neck. I don't think that's how many inches I usually use for the neck. I think it's closer to 12, but this will give me a couple of inches to pull through, and I can always shorten it, but you can never lengthen it. So I'd rather waste an inch than waste 7 because I couldn't, or 14 because I couldn't use it. All right, so I'm going to take, these are my 2 shorter pieces, this is my longer piece, and I need a good old magnetic pin cushion. Best thing I ever bought. That was so useful. So I'm going to take a safety pin. I doubled over my elastic at the end, and I'm just putting it on the safety pin. This is my best way of running elastic. I've been doing it forever. Some people I'm sure have other ways. This gets the job done. Sending it through my opening here. And we're just going to push and pull. Push and pull. Push and pull. And that's going to get us through. Now it's going to be a little tight right there where the buttons are. Just kind of push. Of course, if you use a smaller safety pin, it's a little easier, but I have a kind of a healthy size safety pin. And push and pull. The only thing you want to make sure you keep an eye on is this end down here. Sometimes I hold on to the end while I'm doing this, just so I don't lose it, because if I lose it, I gotta start all over again. And I know that because I've done it. Alright. And then I'm at the end. And I'm going to pull. I'm going to hold on to both. Actually, what I'll do is I'm just going to send this little end onto the safety pin as well. So safety pin's holding both ends of my elastic. And then I'm going to pull that collar. Let's pull it into shape. And of course my safety pin decides to tuck in there, but that's okay. It's kind of hard to get it to pull to the other side. Move that fabric. It eventually evens out. And then you get that little neckline. And that's actually a pretty good size neckline for her. It always looks so tiny, but honestly, when you look at their clothes, that's what you get. Little teeny tiny necklines. And of course this is more than enough stretch to go right over her head, so no big closure needed. So I'm going to take my elastic off my safety pin, and it is my safety to keep them together. You want to try and make sure that you don't have a twist in your elastic. That is a little more difficult to do with this little 1/4 inch elastic, but just trying to make sure it's not. Hold on to that stuff though. It will get away from you. Alright, now since this is 1/4 inch elastic, usually you would fold elastic over like this and zigzag it down. And I can do that. It's just a little challenging. So what, no I did not. See what I'm talking about? If you don't hold on to it, it'll slip right back in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew it down here on top of the bias tape, and then I'm going to slip this over and sew it down. So I'm going to trim this a little bit. I'm going to trim this as soon as I can get it over here. So see, I've kind of made a pocket, and I'm going to put that on the machine before that elastic gets away. And we're just going to go over the top of it real quick. Of course, again, this is in the back of your dress. You can do this all kinds of ways, but what this does is it secures it all at once, and it keeps it flat. You don't end up with that buckle where the elastic overlaps. Now I'm going to trim this elastic really close. Make sure you don't hit your bias tape. And I'm going to come over that bias tape one more time, a little closer to the edge. And back stitch over it. Now, again, this doesn't show too much on this side. There's a bunch of little pennants here. So, and this is such a busy fabric. But that will secure your little neck. You can mark the fabric, make sure it's nice and secure and evened out. And that is our little neckline. I did want to show you one sleeve because it's so easy, because we've made this little casing out of the hem. Again, I'm going to just hook that elastic. Can you see? I'm just doubling over the end of it so it makes it a little stronger. Slip it on my safety pin like this. See? And then the sleeve, because we used the hem, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the try to open it. There we go. I'll put the elastic in, and I'm going to run it till the end meets down here. Just a little bit more. And we're going to just a little bit more. There we go. All right, the elastic is right here on the edge. Right there, if you can see. And I'm just going to run a stitch over that to keep it from moving. And then what will happen is that will get caught in our seam that's going to close up our sides. So anyway, I'm just going to pull this through, finish pulling the elastic through, do the same thing on this side. Again, this saves us some bulk, so carefully pull it down, put it under the sewing machine, right there at the edge. I don't even know if this would qualify as a 1/4 inch. I'm just seaming right over that elastic inside the casing. So now, the little sleeve is made, and the ends will be caught when we close up the side here. Now let's go to the serger. Okay, now let's discuss this. We have made a neckline with the casing with the elastic. We've used the hem of a short sleeve shirt to make the casing for the little sleeves. We've embroidered it. The only thing we've got left to do is to close this up. And the good part is we're using the hem, the natural hem from the shirt, so we don't even have to hem it. So we're going to turn this right sides together, just like you would any other garment. You're going to sew the seams on the inside, and we're going to start at this little sleeve over here. Now, I think I can do this without pinning, but I just want to check. So I think we've got a little extra on one side, so we're just going to have to kind of maneuver that. Now I can start from the hem and work my way up, and it would probably be easier to adjust from the top of the sleeve up here. So we're going to start here, and this is the hem of the shirt, right sides together, and again this is the side seam that's going to connect everything together. So we're going to fold it out, make sure it's not, whoop, make sure we don't kick up our camera, make sure we don't have any kinks, and I'm just going to put the two hems right together. I'm going to lift up my presser foot, make sure I don't have any fabric in the way because this thing cuts. It's a serger. We've got the blade up. Let me find my presser foot, Now, we're just going to go slowly up the side. We're not taking off a lot of the side, we're keeping the line going. Alright, and we're going to have a little bit of adjustment here. Because if you remember, I did not measure twice. So what I'm doing is I'm taking up that little tiny discrepancy underneath my seam here. Like I said, the serger is a forgiving solve. It's a great machine. It's fast. It's efficient. And it'll take on a lot. Cut it. And there we go. We have sewn the seam all the way to the sleeve. Now let's sew the other one, and then we're going to turn this baby inside out and see what it looks like. Now, again, I'm going to take, this is the bottom of the dress. We're making sure that these two hems match up. Just makes life easier. And we're going to start sewing it. And once we catch it, make sure everything's lined up. Just going down that seam line. The other thing I love about the serger is the fact that it's so secure. It makes great kids' clothes because they're tough on clothes. And my little granddaughter is no exception. Let me just get to this corner, make sure we've got it lined up. Don't take your fingers off. And pull. All right. Let's take her to the table and have the great reveal. Okay, here we go. This is the back. This is the front. And of course it's wrong side out, so we're going to trim a couple of things. Now, when I trim a serger string, I generally try to knot it before I do that. I don't know if that's proper. It just makes me feel more secure. So I'm going to throw a little knot into this one. Oops, this one's not very long. Because this is where the serger ended, left the string. I'm just going to throw a little tiny knot in there. And then I'm going to trim off the end. And I'm going to trim this one off. And I'm going to trim this one off. And I'm going to throw a little knot in the one down here and trim it off. Just trimming off and just throwing knots in the ones that are at the ends where the serger last began and ended. The ones that I cut off otherwise were taken up inside the serger. So again, tie a little knot in this one. Just makes me feel better. Some people will thread their serger thread through the rest of the seam. I've never done that. And then one more little knot right here. And cut that seam off. I mean that stitch, that serger piece. And then we've got all our little pennants cut, and we're going to take it inside out. Oop, got one on the outside. That happens. It's not a problem. We're just clipping it off. And look at what we've got. We have our cute little pilgrim style dress with a elastic collar and sleeves and our little octopus, and this all out of what I would have considered maybe not so attractive men's shirt. But turned out to be a cute little dress. So stay with me and we'll do some more in the next video. Thank you.